Hi, I'm Emma Everett, Client Advice Manager and Chair of the Residential Investment Committee at Momentum Wealth. Over the last few weeks, I've been catching up with members from our team to discuss the COVID-19 pandemic and its impact on WA's property market. This week, I'm joined again by our Managing Director, Damian Collins. Thanks for joining us, Damian.
Pleasure, Emma. Good to be here.
Now, Damian, in the weeks since we first caught up, we've seen a number of changes in the local property market. We saw a sharp initial drop in sales activity, followed by a gradual increase in sales numbers, tightening stock, and now CoreLogic reporting price resilience in the Perth property market. Can you let us know a little bit of insight into why Perth property prices have remained resilient during this time?
Yeah, thanks, Emma. Look, it's certainly been a bit of a roller coaster a couple of months since COVID-19 really hit the Perth property market. As I guess none of us in the 1st of March probably thought could estimate how quickly things would escalate. By the end of the month, we were not quite shut down, but getting close. And then by the end of April and coming into May, we're really starting to retreat those restrictions. So we saw the same, and of course that affected consumer confidence and property buyers. So coming out of February, Perth was going very strongly, really starting to pick up. And of course, then we saw in April the lowest sales in 30 years. We had 280 odd a week, but it's been very impressive how quickly it's bounced back now into mid and later May. We're actually getting more sales than we were this time last year, surprisingly, albeit 2019 wasn't a great year, but there was no COVID at that time. So I think it's just, it's confidence. People are feeling more confident, and that groundswell of demand, pent-up demand in Perth is very significant. We've had people sitting out of the market for a long time, and we certainly thought that a lot of that would come back in 2020. If anything, I think COVID has maybe just delayed that and deferred the recovery, but it certainly hasn't stopped the recovery that we're going to see in Perth.
Well, it's interesting. We've seen buyers and sellers waiting things out during March and early April. And so that, combined with the low levels of stock that we entered 2020 with, mean that we're now at a 6-year low for properties for sale, available for stock and for rent. And so that's had a big impact on the resilience of prices in Perth as well. And so this low level of stock, what does this mean for the market over the next few months?
Well, yeah, property's about supply and demand, and even though we saw demand drop off, as you mentioned there, the actual stock for sale has continued to drop. Sellers just aren't bringing their properties to market, so buyers are competing for a smaller pool of properties. So unless we do see a big uplift in stock for sale, it's going to put some upward price pressure. Now, certainly it's you're brave to maybe in a COVID environment predict price growth, but I certainly think there's a really good chance that Perth will at least hold its own over the next few months. And once we start to get back to that normal economy or more normal economy, I think that the pressure will certainly be upwards.
Now, certainly talking in the national context, Perth's supply pressures are placing us in a good position to compared to some other interstate property markets. Another demand factor that comes into play, of course, is population growth. And while Sydney and Melbourne have benefited more than Perth has by overseas population growth over the last several years, this also makes them more vulnerable to that kind of demand withdrawal, as understandably is less available to us in the coming months and the coming year. Yeah. Another factor where Perth has an advantage, of course, is affordability, with us being second in the country for affordability in housing, with a much lower percentage of income needed to meet loan repayments compared to, say, Sydney, where 40% of a household income could be needed to meet loan repayments, which understandably puts people under a lot of pressure. Now, with Perth being so affordable, this leads into some great opportunities for first home buyers to enter the market at a good price and buy in a great location and potentially even a higher location than they might otherwise be able to afford. Yeah. Now, at the other end of the market, Damian, we're seeing that the premium and sub-premium markets are starting to move ahead, and there's some evidence that they could lead the price recovery in Perth. Can you let us know what we're seeing at that end of the market?
Yeah, certainly the higher end of the market was already coming well out of its downturn back even in mid 2019. So that was the first sector out, and it was performing particularly strongly. Again, you got that pent up demand, and just with interest rates so low, people are just saying, well, I feel confident about my role. I know the interest rates are low; they're going to stay low, and people are making that decision to trade up and buy in those better areas. Now, even if you had $1 million mortgage, it's pretty big, but your repayments at 2.5% interest per annum is only about just over $2,000 a month, or 450 plus to 480 a week. I mean, that's what you can pay in rent in a lot of cases. So people are going, well, it's better off to go and buy. And in fact, in a number of Perth suburbs, is actually far cheaper to buy than it is to rent. So all those factors driving people to say, well, why wouldn't I? And particularly we're seeing it that the starting point is at the higher end of the market.
Absolutely. And of course, what's interesting is that while we entered this pandemic season expecting to find some bargains in the marketplace, this combination of low supply and relatively strong affordability in these markets has meant that there's not as many bargains to be had. Property owners have been taking advantage of the various stimulus packages available from industry and from government to keep their homes, and so we're not seeing widespread forced sales or big discounts from sellers. In fact, our buyers agency team are starting to see that they're competing for properties again and missing out on a number of quality properties. So, Damian, with that in mind, what would your advice be to someone who's entering the market today? What makes for a good purchase in this market?
Yeah, look, we'd all like to bag the bargain of the century, but I've seen people lose far more money waiting for prices to come down rather than getting in at the right time. So I just don't think we're going to see a groundswell of forced selling at all in Perth. In fact, certainly with the economy getting back on track sooner rather than later, as we said earlier, there's that underground dwelling of demand is there. It's just been deferred. So I guess you're still going to look at all the fundamentals, looking about where to buy near the infrastructure or proposed infrastructure, near the schools, the road systems, all the other things that we've been talking about for many years, and what our buyers agent team do. And when you get that good quality property, don't focus it down just to that, a couple of thousand extra to bag that bargain. That if you get the right property in a good growth area, that you buy it at a fair price, that's how you do really well in property.
Absolutely, and certainly the difference of just a couple of percent in price resiliency and capital growth over 10 years makes a far bigger financial impact than the short term of getting a bargain today.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all about just that 1% extra capital growth per annum over 10 years when it's compounding can be 15 to 20% of additional net value and net worth in that property. So that is far more important than the small extra bit you might bag as a so-called bargain.
Thanks for joining us again, Damian, and for your feedback today.
Pleasure, Emma. Thanks.
Thanks for joining us today. I hope you found this helpful, and if you'd like information from some of our other experts through this series, do visit our website. If you are planning property purchase and you'd like some advice on how to choose the right property and negotiate to protect your interests, do get in touch with us. Our buyers agency team are active in the market and looking out for opportunities for our clients to take advantage and make their next move in property.